Chapter 7. The Unveiling of the Stranger. The stranger went into the little parlor of the Coach and Horses about 5:30 in the morning, and there he remained until near midday, the blinds down, the door shut, and none after Hall's repulse venturing near him. All that time he must have fasted. Thrice he rang his bell, the third time furiously and continuously, but no one answered him. "Him and his go to the devil, indeed," said Mrs. Hall. Presently came an imperfect rumor of the burglary at the vicarage, and two were put together. Hall, assisted by Wodgers, went off to find Mr. Shuckleforth, the magistrate, and to take his advice. No one ventured upstairs. How the stranger occupied himself is unknown. Now and then he would stride violently up and down, and twice came an outburst of curses, a tearing of paper, and a violent smashing of bottles. The little group of scared but curious people increased. Mrs. Huxter came over. Some gay young fellows resplendent in black ready-made jackets and piqué paper ties, for it was Whit Monday, joined the group with confused interrogations. Young Archie Harker distinguished himself by going up the yard and trying to peep under the window blinds. He could see nothing, but gave reason for supposing that he did, and others of the Iping youth presently joined him. It was the finest of all possible Whit Mondays, and down the village street stood a row of nearly a dozen booths, a shooting gallery, and on the grass by the forge were 3 yellow and chocolate wagons, and some picturesque strangers of both sexes putting up a coconut shy. The gentlemen wore blue jerseys, the ladies white aprons, and quite fashionable hats with heavy plumes. Wodger of the Purple Fawn and Mr. Jaggers, the cobbler, who also sold old second-hand ordinary bicycles, were stretching a string of Union Jacks and Royal Ensigns, which had originally celebrated the first Victorian Jubilee, across the road. And inside, in the artificial darkness of the parlor, into which only one thin jet of sunlight penetrated, the stranger, hungry we must suppose, and fearful, hidden in his uncomfortable hot wrappings, poured through his dark glasses upon his paper, or chinked his dirty little bottles, and occasionally swore savagely at the boys, audible if invisible, outside the windows. In the corner by the fireplace lay the fragments of 6 smashed bottles, and a pungent twang of chlorine tainted the air. So much we know from what was heard at the time and what was subsequently seen in the room. About noon he suddenly opened his parlor door, and stood glaring fixedly at the 3 or 4 people in the bar. "Mrs. Hall," he said. Somebody went sheepishly and called for Mrs. Hall. Mrs. Hall appeared after an interval, a little short of breath, but all the fiercer for that. Hall was still out. She had deliberated over this scene, and she came holding a little tray with an unsettled bill upon it. "Is't your bill you're wanting, sir?" she said. "Why wasn't my breakfast laid? Why haven't you prepared my meals and answered my bell? Do you think I live without eating?" "Why isn't my bill paid?" said Mrs. Hall. "That's what I want to know." "I told you 3 days ago I was awaiting a remittance." "I told you 2 days ago I wasn't going to await no remittances. You can't grumble if your breakfast waits a bit if my bill's been waiting these 5 days, can you?" The stranger swore briefly but vividly. "Now," from the bar. "And I'd thank you kindly, sir, if you'd keep your swearing to yourself, sir," said Mrs. Hall. The stranger stood looking more like an angry diving helmet than ever. It was universally felt in the bar that Mrs. Hall had the better of him. His next words showed as much. "Look here, my good woman." "Don't good woman me," said Mrs. Hall. "I've told you my remittance hasn't come." "Remittance, indeed," said Mrs. Hall. "Still, I dare say, in my pocket." "You told me 3 days ago you hadn't anything but a sovereign's worth of silver upon you." "Well, I've found some more." "Hullo," from the bar. "I wonder where you found it," said Mrs. Hall. That seemed to annoy the stranger very much. He stamped his foot. "What do you mean?" he said. "That I wonder where you found it," said Mrs. Hall. "And before I take any bills or get any breakfasts or do any such things whatsoever, you got to tell me 1 or 2 things I don't understand and what nobody don't understand, and what everybody is very anxious to understand." I want to know what you been doing to my chair upstairs, and I want to know how 'tis your room was empty and how you got in again. Them as stops in this house comes in by the doors. That's the rule of the house, and that you didn't do. And what I want to know is how you did come in. And I want to know—" Suddenly the stranger raised his gloved hands clenched, stamped his foot, and said, "Stop!" with such extraordinary violence that he silenced her instantly. "You don't understand," he said, "who I am or what I am. I'll show you. By heaven, I'll show you." Then he put his open palm over his face and withdrew it. The center of his face became a black cavity. "Here," he said. He stepped forward and handed Mrs. Hall something which she, staring at his metamorphosed face, accepted automatically. Then, when she saw what it was, she screamed loudly, dropped it, and staggered back. The nose, it was the stranger's nose, pink and shining, rolled on the floor. Then he removed his spectacles, and everyone in the bar gasped. He took off his hat, and with a violent gesture tore at his whiskers and bandages. For a moment they resisted him. A flash of horrible anticipation passed through the bar. "Oh, my God," said one. Then off they came. It was worse than anything. Mrs. Hall, standing open-mouthed and horror-struck, shrieked at what she saw, and made for the door of the house. Everyone began to move. They were prepared for scars, disfigurements, tangible horrors. But nothing. The bandages and false hair flew across the passage into the bar, making a hobbledehoy jump to avoid them. Everyone tumbled on everyone else down the steps, for the man who stood there shouting some incoherent explanation was a solid gesticulating figure up to the coat collar of him, and then nothingness, no visible thing at all. People down the village heard shouts and shrieks, and looking up the street saw the coach and horses violently firing out its humanity. They saw Mrs. Hall fall down and Mr. Teddy Hentfrey jump to avoid tumbling over her. And then they heard the frightful screams of Milly, who, emerging suddenly from the kitchen at the noise of the tumult, had come upon the headless stranger from behind. These increased suddenly. Forthwith everyone all down the street, the sweetstuff seller, coconut-shy proprietor and his assistant, the swing man, little boys and girls, rustic dandies, smart wenches, smocked elders, and aproned gypsies, began running towards the inn. And in a miraculously short space of time a crowd of perhaps 40 people, and rapidly increasing, swayed and hooted and inquired and exclaimed and suggested in front of Mrs. Hall's establishment. Everyone seemed eager to talk at once, and the result was babble. A small group supported Mrs. Hall, who was picked up in a state of collapse. There was a conference, and the incredible evidence of a vociferous eyewitness. "Oh, Bogey! What's he been doing, then? Ain't hurt the girl, has he? Run at him with a knife, I believe. No head, I tell ya. I don't mean no manner of speaking, I mean man without a head. Nonsense, it's just some conjuring trick. Fetched off his wrapping, he did." In its struggles to see in through the open door, the crowd formed itself into a straggling wedge, with the more adventurous apex nearest to the inn. "He stood for a moment. I heard the girl scream, and he turned. I saw her skirts whisk, and he went after her. Didn't take 10 seconds. Back he comes with a knife in his hand and a loaf, stood just as if he was staring, not a moment ago. Went in that door. I tell you, he ain't got no head at all. You just missed him." There was a disturbance behind, and the speaker stopped to step aside for a little procession that was marching very resolutely towards the house. First Mr. Hall, very red and determined, then Mr. Bobby Jaffers, the village constable, then the wary Mr. Wodgers. They had come in now armed with a warrant. People shouted conflicting information of the recent circumstances. "Ed or no Ed," said Jaffers, "I got arrestin', and arrestin' I will." Mr. Hall marched up the steps, marched straight to the door of the parlor, and flung it open. "Constable," he said, "do your duty." Jaffers marched in, Hall next, Wodgers last. They saw in the dim light the headless figure facing them, with a gnawed crust of bread in one gloved hand and a chunk of cheese in the other. "That's him," said Hall. "What the devil's this?" came in a tone of angry expostulation from above the collar of the figure. "You're a damned rum customer, mister," said Mr. Jaffers, "but head or no head, the warrant says body and duty's duty." "Keep off," said the figure, starting back. Abruptly he whipped down the bread and cheese, and Mr. Hall just grasped the knife on the table in time to save it. Off came the stranger's left glove, and was slapped in Mr. Jaffers' face. In another moment Jaffers, cutting short some statement concerning a warrant, had gripped him by the handless wrist and caught his invisible throat. He got a sounding kick on the shin that made him shout, but he kept his grip. Hall sent the knife sliding along the table to Wodgers, who acted as goalkeeper for the offensive, so to speak, and then stepped forward as Jaffers and the stranger swayed and staggered towards him, clutching and hitting in. A chair stood in the way, and went aside with a crash as they came down together. "Get the feet," said Jaffers between his teeth. Mr. Hall, endeavoring to act on instructions, received a sounding kick in the ribs that disposed of him for a moment, and Mr. Wodgers, seeing the decapitated stranger had rolled over and got the upper side of Jaffers, retreated towards the door, knife in hand, and so collided with Mr. Huckster and the Sidderbridge carter coming to the rescue of law and order. At the same moment down came 3 or 4 bottles from the chiffonier and shot a web of pungency into the air of the room. "I'll surrender," cried the stranger, though he had Jaffers down, and in another moment he stood up panting, a strange figure, headless and handless, for he had pulled off his right glove now as well as his left. "It's no good," he said, as if sobbing for breath. It was the strangest thing in the world to hear that voice coming as if out of empty space, but the Sussex peasants are perhaps the most matter-of-fact people under the sun. Jaffers got up also and produced a pair of handcuffs. Then he stared. "I say," said Jaffers, brought up short by a dim realization of the incongruity of the whole business. "Darn it, can't use 'em as I can see." The stranger ran his arm down his waistcoat, and, as if by a miracle, the buttons to which his empty sleeve pointed became undone. Then he said something about his shin and stooped down. He seemed to be fumbling with his shoes and socks. "Why," said Huckster suddenly, "that's not a man at all. It's just empty clothes. Look, you can see down his collar and the linings of his clothes. I could put my arm—" He extended his hand. It seemed to meet something in mid-air, and he drew it back with a sharp exclamation. "I wish you'd keep your fingers out of my eyes," said the aerial voice in a tone of savage expostulation. "The fact is, I'm all here, head, hands, legs, and all the rest of it, but it happens I'm invisible. It's a confounded nuisance, but I am. That's no reason why I should be poked to pieces by every stupid bumpkin in Iping, is it?" The suit of clothes, now all unbuttoned and hanging loosely upon its unseen supports, stood up, arms akimbo. Several other of the men-folk had now entered the room, so that it was closely crowded. "Invisible, eh?" said Huckster, ignoring the stranger's abuse. "Who ever heard of the likes of that? It's strange, perhaps, but it's not a crime. Why am I assaulted by a policeman in this fashion?" "Ah, that's a different matter," said Jaffers. "No doubt you are a bit difficult to see in this light, but I got a warrant and it's all correct. What I'm after ain't no invisibility, it's burglary. There's a house been broke into and money took." "Well?" "And circumstances certainly point—" "Stuff and nonsense," said the invisible man. "I hope so, sir, but I've got my instructions." "Well," said the stranger, I'll come, but no handcuffs." "It's the regular thing," said Jaffers. "No handcuffs," stipulated the stranger. "Pardon me." Abruptly the figure sat down, and before anyone could realize what was being done, the slippers, socks, and trousers had been kicked off under the table. Then he sprang up again and flung off his coat. "Here, stop that," said Jaffers, suddenly realizing what was happening. He gripped at the waistcoat. It struggled, and the shirt slipped out of it and left it limp and empty in his hand. "Hold him," said Jaffers loudly. "Once he gets the things off—" "Hold him!" cried everyone, and there was a rush at the fluttering white shirt, which was now all that was visible of the stranger. The shirt-sleeve planted a shrewd blow in Hall's face that stopped his open-armed advance and sent him backward into old Toothsome the sexton, and in another moment the garment was lifted up and became convulsed and vacantly flapping about the arms, even as a shirt that is being thrust over a man's head. Jaffers clutched at it, and only helped to pull it off. He was struck in the mouth out of the air, and incontinently threw his truncheon and smote Teddy Hentfrey savagely upon the crown of his head. "Look out," said everybody, fencing at random and hitting at nothing. "Hold him, shut the door, don't let him loose, I got something, here he is." A perfect babel of noises they made. Everybody, it seemed, was being hit all at once, and Sandy Wadgers, knowing as ever, and his wits sharpened by a frightful blow in the nose, reopened the door and led the rout. The others, following incontinently, were jammed for a moment in the corner by the doorway. The hitting continued. Phipps, the Unitarian, had a front tooth broken, and Henfrey was injured in the cartilage of his ear. Jaffers was struck under the jaw, and turning, caught at something that intervened between him and Huckster in the melee, and prevented their coming together. He felt a muscular chest, and in another moment the whole mass of struggling, excited men shot out into the crowded hall. "I got him!" shouted Jaffers, choking and reeling through them all, and wrestling with purple face and swelling veins against his unseen enemy. Men staggered right and left as the extraordinary conflict swayed swiftly towards the house door and went spinning down the half-dozen steps of the inn. Jaffers cried in a strangled voice, holding tight nevertheless and making play with his knee, spun around and fell heavily undermost with his head on the gravel. Only then did his fingers relax. There were excited cries of "Hold him! Invisible!" and so forth, and a young fellow, a stranger in the place whose name did not come to light, rushed in at once, caught something, missed his hold, and fell over the constable's prostrate body. Halfway across the road a woman screamed as something pushed by her. A dog, kicked apparently, yelped and ran howling into Huckster's yard, and with that the transit of the invisible man was accomplished. For a space people stood amazed and gesticulating, and then came panic, and scattered them abroad through the village as gust scatters dead leaves. But Jaffers lay quite still, face upward and knees bent, at the foot of the steps of the inn. End of chapters 5, 6, and 7. Chapter 8. In Transit. The 8th chapter is exceedingly brief, and relates that Gibbons, the amateur naturalist of the district, while lying out on the spacious open downs without a soul within a couple of miles of him, as he thought, and almost dozing, heard close to him the sound as of a man coughing, sneezing, and then swearing savagely to himself, and looking, beheld nothing. Yet the voice was indisputable. It continued to swear with that breadth and variety that distinguishes the swearing of a cultivated man. It grew to a climax, diminished again, and died away in the distance, going, as it seemed to him, in the direction of Aberdeen. It lifted to a spasmodic sneeze and ended. Gibbons had heard nothing of the morning's occurrences, but the phenomenon was so striking and disturbing that his philosophical tranquillity vanished. He got up hastily and hurried down the steepness of the hill towards the village as fast as he could go. Chapter 9. Mr. Thomas Marvel. You must picture Mr. Thomas Marvel as a person of copious, flexible visage, a nose of cylindrical protrusion, a liquorish, ample, fluctuating mouth, and a beard of bristling eccentricity. His figure inclined to embonpoint. His short limbs accentuated this inclination. He wore a furry silk hat, and the frequent substitution of twine and shoelaces for buttons, apparent at critical points of his costume, marked a man essentially bachelor. Mr. Thomas Marvel was sitting with his feet in a ditch by the roadside over the down towards Aberdeen, about 1.5 miles out of Iping. His feet, save for socks of irregular open-work, were bare, his big toes were broad and pricked like the ears of a watchful dog. In a leisurely manner, he did everything in a leisurely manner, he was contemplating trying on a pair of boots. They were the soundest boots he had come across for a long time, but too large for him, whereas the ones he had were, in dry weather, a very comfortable fit, but too thin-soled for damp. Mr. Thomas Marvel hated roomy shoes, but then he hated damp. He had never properly thought out which he hated most, and it was a pleasant day, and there was nothing better to do. So he put the 4 shoes in a graceful group on the turf and looked at them, and seeing them there among the grass and springing agrimony, it suddenly occurred to him that both pairs were exceedingly ugly to see. He was not at all startled by a voice behind him. "They're boots, anyhow," said the voice. "They are. Charity boots," said Mr. Thomas Marvel, with his head on one side, regarding them distastefully. "And which is the ugliest pair in the whole blessed universe, I'm darned if I know." Said the voice. "I've worn worse. In fact, I've worn none. But none so audaciously ugly, if you'll allow the expression. I've been cadging boots, in particular, for days, because I was sick of them. They're sound enough, of course, but a gentleman on tramp sees such a thunderin' lot of his boots. And if you'll believe me, I've raised nothing in the whole blessed country, try as I would, but them. Look at 'em. And a good country for boots, too, in a general way. But it's just my promiscuous luck. I've got my boots in this country 10 years or more, and then they treat you like this." "It's a beast of a country," said the voice, "and pigs for people." "Ain't it?" said Mr. Thomas Marvel. "Lord, but them boots, it beats it." He turned his head over his shoulder to the right to look at the boots of his interlocutor with a view to comparisons. And lo, where the boots of his interlocutor should have been were neither legs nor boots. He was irradiated by the dawn of a great amazement. "Where are ye?" said Mr. Thomas Marvel over his shoulder and coming on all fours. He saw a stretch of empty downs with the wind swaying the remote green-pointed furze bushes. "Am I drunk?" said Mr. Marvel. "Have I had visions? Was I talking to myself? What the—" "Don't be alarmed," said a voice. "None of your ventriloqualizing me," said Mr. Thomas Marvel, rising sharply to his feet. "Where are ye? Alarmed, indeed." "Don't be alarmed," repeated the voice. "You'll be alarmed in a minute, you silly fool," said Mr. Thomas Marvel. "Where are ye? Let me get my mark on you." "Are you buried?" said Mr. Thomas Marvel after an interval. There was no answer, and Mr. Thomas Marvel stood bootless and amazed, his jacket nearly thrown off. "Pewit," said a pewit, very remote. "Pewit, indeed," said Mr. Thomas Marvel. "This ain't no time for foolery." The down was desolate, east and west, north and south. The road, with its shallow ditches and white bordering stakes, ran smoothly and empty north and south, and, save for that pewit, the blue sky was empty too. "So help me," said Mr. Thomas Marvel, shuffling his coat onto his shoulders again. "It's the drink. I might have known." "It's not the drink," said the voice. "You keep your nerves steady." "Ow!" said Mr. Marvel, and his face grew white amidst its patches. "It's the drink," his lips repeated noiselessly. He remained staring about him, rotating slowly backwards. "I could have swore I heard a voice," he whispered. "Of course you did." "It's there again," said Mr. Marvel, closing his eyes and clasping his hand on his brow with a tragic gesture. He was suddenly taken by the collar and shaken violently, and left more dazed than ever. "Don't be a fool," said the voice. "I'm off my blooming chump," said Mr. Marvel. "It's no good. It's fretting about them blasted boots. I'm off my blessed blooming chump. Or it's spirits." "Neither one thing nor the other," said the voice. "Listen." "Chump," said Mr. Marvel. "1 minute," said the voice, penetratingly, tremulous with self-control. "Well," said Mr. Thomas Marvel, with a strange feeling of having been dug in the chest by a finger. "You think I'm just imagination?" "Just imagination." "What else can you be?" said Mr. Thomas Marvel, rubbing the back of his neck. "Very well," said the voice in a tone of relief. "Then I'm going to throw flints at you till you think differently." "But where are you?" The voice made no answer. Whiz came a flint apparently out of the air and missed Mr. Marvel's shoulder by a hair's breadth. Mr. Marvel, turning, saw a flint jerk up into the air, trace a complicated path, hang for a moment, and then fling at his feet with almost invisible rapidity. He was too amazed to dodge. Whiz it came and ricocheted from a bare toe into the ditch. Mr. Thomas Marvel jumped a foot and howled aloud. Then he started to run, tripped over an unseen obstacle, and came head over heels into a sitting position. "Now," said the voice, as a third stone curved upward and hung in the air above the tramp, "am I imagination?" Mr. Marvel, by way of reply, struggled to his feet, and was immediately rolled over again. He lay quiet for a moment. "If you struggle any more," said the voice, "I shall throw the flint at your head." "It's a fair do," said Mr. Thomas Marvel, sitting up, taking his wounded toe in hand, and fixing his eye on the third missile. "I don't understand it. Stones flinging themselves, stones talking. Put yourself down. Rot away. I'm done." The third flint fell. "It's very simple," said the voice. "I'm an invisible man." "Tell us something I don't know," said Mr. Marvel, gasping with pain. "Where you've hid, how you do it, I don't know. I'm beat." "That's all," said the voice. "I'm invisible. That's what I want you to understand." "Anyone could see that. There's no need for you to be so confounded impatient, mister. Now then, give us a notion. How are you hid?" "I'm invisible. That's the great point. And what I want you to understand is this." "But whereabouts?" interrupted Mr. Marvel. "Here, 6 yards in front of you." "Oh, come, I ain't blind. You'll be telling me next you're just thin air. I'm not one of your ignorant tramps." "Yes, I am. Thin air. You're looking through me." "What? Ain't there any stuff to you? A vox, what is it? Jabber, is it that?" "I am just a human being, solid, needing food and drink, needing covering too. But I'm invisible. You see? Invisible. Simple idea. Invisible." "What, real like?" "Yes, real." "Let's have a hand of you," said Mr. Marvel, "if you are real. It won't be so darn out of the way like then." "Lord," he said, "how you made me jump, gripping me like that." He felt the hand that had closed round his wrist with his disengaged fingers, and his fingers went timorously up the arm, patted a muscular chest, and explored a bearded face. Marvel's face was astonishment. "I'm dashed," he said, "if this don't beat cockfighting. Most remarkable. And there I can see a rabbit clean through you 1/2 mile away. Not a bit of you visible. Except... He scrutinized the apparently empty space keenly. "You haven't been eating bread and cheese?" he asked, holding the invisible arm. "You're quite right, and it's not quite assimilated into the system." "Ah," said Mr. Marvel. "Sort of ghostly, though." "Of course, all this isn't half so wonderful as you think." "It's quite wonderful enough for my modest wants," said Mr. Thomas Marvel. "How yer manage it? How the deuce is it done?" "It's too long a story, and besides—" "I'll tell you, the whole business fairly beats me," said Mr. Marvel. "What I want to say at present is this. I need help. I have come to that. I came upon you suddenly. I was wandering mad with rage, naked, impotent. I could have murdered. And I saw you." "Lord," said Mr. Marvel. "I came up behind you, hesitated, went on." Mr. Marvel's expression was eloquent. "Then stopped. 'Here,' I said, 'is an outcast like myself. This is the man for me.' So I turned back and came to you, and—" "Lord," said Mr. Marvel, "but I'm all in a tizzy. May I ask, how is it? And what may you be requiring in the way of help? Invisible." "I want you to help me get clothes and shelter, and then with other things. I've left them long enough. If you won't, well, but you will, must." "Look here," said Mr. Marvel. "I'm too flabbergasted. Don't knock me about any more, and leave me go. I must get steady a bit. And you've pretty near broken my toe. It's all so unreasonable. Empty downs, empty sky, nothing visible for miles except the bosom of nature. And then comes a voice out of heaven, and stones, and a fist, Lord!" "Pull yourself together," said the voice, "for you have to do the job I have chosen for you." Mr. Marvel blew out his cheeks, and his eyes were round. "I've chosen you," said the voice. "You are the only man, except some of those fools down there, who knows there is such a thing as an invisible man. You have to be my helper. Help me, and I will do great things for you. An invisible man is a man of power." He stopped for a moment to sneeze violently. "But if you betray me," he said, "if you fail to do as I direct you—" He paused and tapped Mr. Marvel's shoulder smartly. Mr. Marvel gave a yelp of terror at the touch. "I don't want to betray you," said Mr. Marvel, edging away from the direction of the fingers. "Don't you go a-thinking that, whatever you do. All I want to do is help you. Just tell me what I got to do. Lord, whatever you want done, that I'm most willing to do." Chapter 10. Mr. Marvel's Visit to Iping. After the first gusty panic had spent itself, Iping became argumentative. Skepticism suddenly reared its head, rather nervous skepticism, not at all assured of its back, but skepticism nevertheless. It is so much easier not to believe in an invisible man, and those who had actually seen him dissolve into air or felt the strength of his arm could be counted on the fingers of 2 hands. And of these witnesses Mr. Wodgers was presently missing, having retired impregnably behind the bolts and bars of his own house, and Jaffers was lying stunned in the parlor of the Coach and Horses. Great and strange ideas transcending experience often have less effect upon men and women than smaller, more tangible considerations. Iping was gay with bunting, and everybody was in a gala dress. Whit Monday had been looked forward to for a month or more. By the afternoon even those who believed in the unseen were beginning to resume their little amusements in a tentative fashion, on the supposition that he had quite gone away, and with the skeptics he was already a jest. But people, skeptics and believers alike, were remarkably sociable all that day. Hazeman's Meadow was gay with a tent in which Mrs. Bunting and other ladies were preparing tea, while without the Sunday school children ran races and played games under the noisy guidance of the curate and the Misses Cuss and Sackbut. No doubt there was a slight uneasiness in the air, but people for the most part had the sense to conceal whatever imaginative qualms they experienced. On the village green inclined strong rope, down which, clinging the while to a pulley-swung handle, one could be hurled violently against a sack at the other end, came in for considerable favor among the adolescents, as also did the swings and the coconut shies. There was also promenading, and the steam organ attached to a small roundabout filled the air with a pungent flavor of oil, and with equally pungent music. Members of the club who had attended church in the morning were splendid in badges of pink and green, and some of the gayer-minded had also adorned their bowler hats with brilliant-colored favors of ribbon. Old Fletcher, whose conceptions of holiday-making were severe, was visible through the jasmine about his window or through the open door, whichever way you chose to look, poised delicately on a plank supported on 2 chairs, and whitewashing the ceiling of his front room. About 4 o'clock a stranger entered the village from the direction of the Downs. He was a short, stout person in an extraordinarily shabby top-hat, and he appeared to be very much out of breath. His cheeks were alternately limp and tightly puffed. His mottled face was apprehensive, and he moved with a sort of reluctant alacrity. He turned the corner of the church, and directed his way to the Coach and Horses. Among others, old Fletcher remembers seeing him, and indeed the old gentleman was struck so by his peculiar agitation that he inadvertently allowed a quantity of whitewash to run down the brush into the sleeve of his coat while regarding him. This stranger, to the perceptions of the proprietor of the coconut shy, appeared to be talking to himself, and Mr. Huckster remarked the same thing. He stopped at the foot of the Coach and Horses steps, and, according to Mr. Huckster, appeared to undergo a severe internal struggle before he could induce himself to enter the house. Finally he marched up the steps, and was seen by Mr. Huckster to turn to the left, and open the door of the parlor. Mr. Huckster heard voices from within the room, and from the bar apprising the man of his error. "That room's private," said Hall, and the stranger shut the door clumsily and went into the bar. In the course of a few minutes he reappeared, wiping his lips with the back of his hand with an air of quiet satisfaction that somehow impressed Mr. Huckster as assumed. He stood looking about him for some moments, and then Mr. Huckster saw him walk in an oddly furtive manner towards the gates of the yard, upon which the parlor window opened. The stranger, after some hesitation, leant against one of the gate-posts, produced a short clay pipe, and prepared to fill it. His fingers trembled while doing so. He lit it clumsily, and folding his arms began to smoke in a languid attitude, an attitude which his occasional glances up the yard altogether belied. All this Mr. Huckster saw over the canisters of the tobacco window, and the singularity of the man's behavior prompted him to maintain his observation. Presently the stranger stood up abruptly and put his pipe in his pocket. Then he vanished into the yard. Forthwith Mr. Huckster, conceiving he was witness of some petty larceny, leapt round his corner and ran out into the road to intercept the thief. As he did so, Mr. Marvel reappeared, his hat askew, a big bundle in a blue tablecloth in one hand, and 3 books tied together, as it proved afterwards with the vicar's braces, in the other. Directly he saw Huckster he gave a sort of gasp, and turning sharply to the left began to run. "Stop, thief!" cried Huckster, and set off after him. Mr. Huckster's sensations were vivid but brief. He saw the man just before him and spurting briskly for the church corner and the hill road. He saw the village flags and festivities beyond, and a face or so turned towards him. He bawled "Stop!" again. He had hardly gone 10 strides before his shin was caught in some mysterious fashion, and he was no longer running but flying with inconceivable rapidity through the air. He saw the ground suddenly close to his face. The world seemed to splash into a million whirling specks of light, and subsequent proceedings interested him no more. Chapter 11. In the Coach and Horses. Now, in order to clearly understand what had happened in the inn, it is necessary to go back to the moment when Mr. Marvel first came into view of Mr. Huckster's window. At that precise moment, Mr. Cuss and Mr. Bunting were in the parlor. They were seriously investigating the strange occurrences of the morning, and were, with Mr. Hall's permission, making a thorough examination of the invisible man's belongings. Jaffers had partially recovered from his fall and had gone home in the charge of his sympathetic friends. The stranger's scattered garments had been removed by Mrs. Hall and the room tidied up, and on the table under the window where the stranger had been wont to work, Cuss had almost hit at once on 3 big books in manuscript labeled "Diary." "Diary," said Cuss, putting the 3 books on the table. "Now, at any rate, we shall learn something." The vicar stood with his hands on the table. "Diary," repeated Cuss, sitting down, putting 2 volumes to support the 3rd, and opening it. No name on the flyleaf. Bother. Cipher and figures. The vicar came round to look over his shoulder. Cuss turned the pages over with a face suddenly disappointed. Dear me, it's all cipher, Bunting." "There are no diagrams?" asked Mr. Bunting. "No illustrations throwing light?" "See for yourself," said Mr. Cuss. "Some of it's mathematical, and some of it's Russian or some such language, to judge by the letters, and some of it's Greek. Now the Greek I thought you—" "Of course," said Mr. Bunting, taking out and wiping his spectacles and feeling suddenly very uncomfortable, for he had no Greek left in his mind worth talking about. "Yes, the Greek, of course, may furnish a clue. I'll find you a place." "I'd rather glance through the volumes first," said Mr. Bunting, still wiping. "A general impression first, Cuss, and then, we can go looking for clues." He coughed, put on his glasses, arranged them fastidiously, coughed again, and wished something would happen to avert the seemingly inevitable exposure. Then he took the volume Cuss handed him in a leisurely manner, and then something did happen. The door opened suddenly. Both gentlemen started violently, looked round, and were relieved to see a sporadically rosy face beneath a furry silk hat. "Tap?" asked the face, and stood staring. "No," said both gentlemen at once. "Over on the other side, my man," said Mr. Bunting, and "Please shut that door," said Mr. Cuss irritably. "All right," said the intruder, as it seemed in a low voice curiously different from the huskiness of its first inquiry. "Right you are," said the intruder in the former voice. "Stand clear," and he vanished and closed the door. "A sailor, I should judge," said Mr. Bunting. "Amusing fellows they are. Stand clear, indeed. A nautical term, referring to his getting back out of the room, I suppose?" "I dare say so," said Cuss. "My nerves are all loose today. It quite made me jump, the door opening like that." Mr. Bunting smiled as if he had not jumped. "And now," he said with a sigh, "these books." Someone sniffed as he did so. "One thing is indisputable," said Bunting, drawing up a chair next to that of Cuss. "There certainly have been very strange things happen in Iping in the last few days. Very strange." I cannot, of course, believe in this absurd invisibility story." "It's incredible," said Cuss, "incredible. But the fact remains that I certainly saw right down his sleeve." "But did you? Are you sure? Suppose a mirror, for instance. Hallucinations are so easily produced. I don't know if you have ever seen a really good conjurer." "I won't argue again," said Cuss. "We've thrashed that out, Bunting. And just now there's these books. Ah, here's some of what I take to be Greek letters, certainly." He pointed to the middle of the page. Mr. Bunting flushed slightly and brought his face nearer, apparently finding some difficulty with his glasses. Suddenly he became aware of a strange feeling at the nape of his neck. He tried to raise his head and encountered an immovable resistance. The feeling was a curious pressure, the grip of a heavy, firm hand, and it bore his chin irresistibly to the table. "Don't move, little men," whispered a voice, "or I'll brain you both." He looked into the face of Cuss, close to his own, and each saw a horrified reflection of his own sickly astonishment. "I'm sorry to handle you so roughly," said the voice, "but it's unavoidable. Since when did you learn to pry into an investigator's private memoranda?" said the voice, and two chins struck the table simultaneously, and two sets of teeth rattled. "Since when did you learn to invade the private rooms of a man in misfortune?" And the concussion was repeated. "Where have they put my clothes?" "Listen," said the voice. "The windows are fastened, and I've taken the key out of the door. I am a fairly strong man, and I have the poker handy, besides being invisible. There's not the slightest doubt that I could kill you both and get away quite easily if I wanted to. Do you understand? Very well. If I let you go, will you promise not to try any nonsense and do what I tell you?" The vicar and the doctor looked at one another, and the doctor pulled a face. "Yes," said Mr. Bunting, and the doctor repeated it. Then the pressure on the necks relaxed, and the doctor and the vicar sat up, both very red in the face and wriggling their heads. "Please keep sitting where you are," said the invisible man. "Here's the poker, you see. When I came into this room," continued the invisible man, after presenting the poker to the tip of the nose of each of his visitors, "I did not expect to find it occupied, and I expected to find, in addition to my books of memoranda, an outfit of clothing. Where is it? No, don't rise. I can see it's gone. Now, just at present, though the days are quite warm enough for an invisible man to run about stark, the evenings are quite chilly. I want clothing and other accommodation, and I must also have those 3 books. End of chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11. Chapter 12. The Invisible Man Loses His Temper. It is unavoidable that at this point the narrative should break off again, for a certain very painful reason that will presently be apparent. While these things were going on in the parlor, and while Mr. Huckster was watching Mr. Marvel smoking his pipe against the gate, not a dozen yards away were Mr. Hall and Teddy Henfrey discussing in a state of cloudy puzzlement the one Iping topic. Suddenly there came a violent thud against the door of the parlor, a sharp cry, and then silence. "Hello," said Teddy Henfrey. "Hello," from the tap. Mr. Hall took things in slowly but surely. "That ain't right," he said, and came round from behind the bar towards the parlor door. He and Teddy approached the door together, with intent faces. Their eyes considered. "Summat wrong," said Hall, and Henfrey nodded agreement. Whiffs of an unpleasant chemical odor met them, and there was a muffled sound of conversation, very rapid and subdued. "You all right there?" asked Hall, rapping. The muttered conversation ceased abruptly. For a moment, silence. Then the conversation was resumed, in hissing whispers. Then a sharp cry of, "No, no, you don't!" There came a sudden motion and the oversetting of a chair, a brief struggle. Silence again. "What the deuce!" exclaimed Henfrey sotto voce. "You all right there?" asked Mr. Hall sharply again. The vicar's voice answered with a curious jerking intonation. "Quite right. Please don't interrupt." "Odd," said Mr. Henfrey. "Odd," said Mr. Hall. "Says don't interrupt," said Henfrey. "I heard'n," said Hall. "And a sniff," said Henfrey. They remained listening. The conversation was rapid and subdued. "I can't," said Mr. Bunting, his voice rising. "I tell you, sir, I will not." "What was that?" asked Henfrey. "He says he were not," said Hall. "Wasn't speaking to us, was he?" "Disgraceful," said Mr. Bunting within. "Disgraceful," said Mr. Henfrey. "I heard it, distinct." "Who's that speaking now?" asked Henfrey. "Mr. Cuss, I suppose," said Hall. "Can you hear anything?" Silence. The sounds within indistinct and perplexing. "Sounds like throwing the tablecloth about," said Hall. Mrs. Hall appeared behind the bar. Hall made gestures of silence and invitation. This aroused Mrs. Hall's wifely opposition. "What yer listening there for, Hall?" she asked. "Ain't you nothing better to do, busy day like this?" Hall tried to convey everything by grimaces and dumb show, but Mrs. Hall was obdurate. She raised her voice, so Hall and Henfrey, rather crestfallen, tiptoed back to the bar, gesticulating to explain to her. At first she refused to see anything in what they had heard at all. Then she insisted on Hall keeping silence, while Henfrey told her his story. She was inclined to think the whole business nonsense. Perhaps they were just moving the furniture about. "I heard'n say disgraceful, that I did," said Hall. "I heard that, Mrs. Hall," said Henfrey. "Like as not," began Mrs. Hall. "Hush," said Mr. Teddy Henfrey. "Didn't I hear the window?" "What window?" asked Mrs. Hall. "Parlor window," said Henfrey. Everyone stood listening intently. Mrs. Hall's eyes, directed straight before her, saw without seeing the brilliant oblong of the inn door, the road white and vivid, and Huckster's shop front blistering in the June sun. Abruptly Huckster's door opened, and Huckster appeared, eyes staring with excitement, arms gesticulating. "Yap!" cried Huckster. "Stop, thief!" And he ran obliquely across the oblong toward the yard gates, and vanished. Simultaneously came a tumult from the parlor, and a sound of windows being closed. Hall, Henfrey, and the human contents of the tap rushed out at once pell-mell into the street. They saw someone whisk round the corner toward the road, and Mr. Huckster executing a complicated leap in the air that ended on his face and shoulder. Down the street people were standing astonished or running towards them. Mr. Huckster was stunned. Henfrey stopped to discover this, but Hall and the two laborers from the tap rushed at once to the corner, shouting incoherent things, and saw Mr. Marvel vanishing by the corner of the church wall. They appear to have jumped to the impossible conclusion that this was the invisible man suddenly become visible, and set off at once along the lane in pursuit. But Hall had hardly run a dozen yards before he gave a loud shout of astonishment, and went flying headlong sideways, clutching one of the laborers and bringing him to the ground. He had been charged just as one charges a man at football. The second laborer came round in a circle, stared, and conceiving that Hall had tumbled over of his own accord, turned to resume the pursuit, only to be tripped by the ankle just as Huckster had been. Then, as the first laborer struggled to his feet, he was kicked sideways by a blow that might have felled an ox. As he went down, the rush from the direction of the village green came round the corner. The first to appear was the proprietor of the Coconut Shy, a burly man in a blue jersey. He was astonished to see the lane empty save for 3 men sprawling absurdly on the ground. And then something happened to his rearmost foot, and he went headlong and rolled sideways just in time to graze the feet of his brother and partner, following headlong. The two were then kicked, knelt on, fallen over, and cursed by quite a number of over-hasty people. Now when Hall and Henfrey and the laborers ran out of the house, Mrs. Hall, who had been disciplined by years of experience, remained in the bar next the till, and suddenly the parlor door was opened, and Mr. Cuss appeared, and without glancing at her rushed at once down the steps toward the corner. "Hold him," he cried. "Don't let him drop that parcel." He knew nothing of the existence of Marvel, for the invisible man had handed over the books and bundle in the yard. The face of Mr. Cuss was angry and resolute, but his costume was defective, a sort of limp white kilt that could only have passed muster in Greece. "Hold him," he bawled. "He's got my trousers and every stitch of the vicar's clothes." "Tend to him in a minute," he cried to Henfrey as he passed the prostrate huckster, and coming round the corner to join the tumult, was promptly knocked off his feet into an indecorous sprawl. Somebody in full flight trod heavily on his finger. He yelled, struggled to regain his feet, was knocked against and thrown on all fours again, and became aware that he was involved not in a capture, but a rout. Everyone was running back to the village. He rose again and was hit severely behind the ear. He staggered and set off back to the coach and horses forthwith, leaping over the deserted huckster, who was now sitting up, on his way. Behind him, as he was halfway up the inn steps, he heard a sudden yell of rage, rising sharply out of the confusion of cries, and a sounding smack in someone's face. He recognized the voice as that of the Invisible Man, and the note was that of a man suddenly infuriated by a painful blow. In another moment Mr. Cuss was back in the parlor. "He's coming back, Bunting," he said, rushing in. "Save yourself." Mr. Bunting was standing in the window, engaged in an attempt to clothe himself in the hearth-rug and a West Surrey Gazette. "Who's coming?" he said, so startled that his costume narrowly escaped disintegration. "Invisible Man," said Cuss, and rushed on to the window. "We'd better clear out from here. He's fighting mad. Mad!" In another moment he was out in the yard. "Good heavens," said Mr. Bunting, hesitating between two horrible alternatives. He heard a frightful struggle in the passage of the inn, and his decision was made. He clambered out of the window, adjusted his costume hastily, and fled up the village as fast as his fat little legs would carry him. From the moment when the Invisible Man screamed with rage and Mr. Bunting made his memorable flight up the village, it became impossible to give a consecutive account of affairs in Iping. Possibly the Invisible Man's original intention was simply to cover Marvel's retreat with the clothes and books. But his temper, at no time very good, seems to have gone completely at some chance blow, and forthwith he set to smiting and overthrowing for the mere satisfaction of hurting. You must figure the street full of running figures, of doors slamming and fights for hiding places. You must figure the tumult suddenly striking on the unstable equilibrium of old Fletcher's planks and 2 chairs, with cataclysmic results. You must figure an appalled couple caught dismally in a swing. And then the whole tumultuous rush has passed, and the Iping street with its gauds and flags is deserted save for the still raging unseen, and littered with coconuts, overthrown canvas screens, and the scattered stock in trade of a sweetstuff stall. Everywhere there is a sound of closing shutters and shoving bolts, and the only visible humanity is an occasional flitting eye under a raised eyebrow in the corner of a window-pane. The Invisible Man amused himself for a little while by breaking all the windows in the coach and horses, and then he thrust a street lamp through the parlor window of Mrs. Gribble. He, it must have been, who cut the telegraph wire to Aberdeen just beyond Higgins' cottage on the Aberdeen road, and after that, as his peculiar qualities allowed, he passed out of human perceptions altogether, and he was neither heard, seen, nor felt in Iping any more. He vanished, absolutely, but it was the best part of 2 hours before any human being ventured out again into the desolation of Iping Street.